My name is Olumayowa, and as I said, I'm Nigerian. I'm calling from Dar es Salaam right now in Tanzania, because I'm here to facilitate a program partly related to conversations around the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and free markets across the continent of Africa. I think first, so I don't have a slide, but I want this to be like a conversation, right? But I think first that we are on a cusp of significant transformation on the continent of Africa, with the Africa Continental Free Trade area. I think this is remarkable that all of these countries came together to sign this agreement that has encompassed so many countries. And the promise for a single market for goods, services, and investment would foster a lot of growth across the continent. That's the kind of thing that my career sort of is focused on promoting, that we see like more opportunities for trade across the continent, so that we see intra-African trade increase significantly. I think that for social entrepreneurs, there is a lot of opportunities for us who are involved in social entrepreneurship, aside from financial gain. There is the positive social change that this brings, and that the Africa Continental Free Trade area brings an opportunity for a landscape where there are a lot of opportunities for us to sort of to explore. Dr. Socrates from Kenya has given a very thorough background about about the data, right? Where we are coming from, what led to the Africa Continental free trade area, and those agreements that preceded this, some of which were not very successful, but we do have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area in sort of being executed at the moment. So he has provided background on that, and has provided background on market access. But I would just briefly go over that a little bit, because I had a few points I wanted to make. So imagine that you are able to reach 1.4 billion people across the continent, from diverse cultures, diverse regions. This helps us as social entrepreneurs to expand our impact across the continent, to expand our reach across the continent. But as Dr. Socrates said, awareness for the Africa Continental Free Trade area among social enterprises in Africa is still very, very low. And the program that I'm at right now is essentially trying to do that. We're trying to speak to young people across the continent, from Uganda, from South Sudan, from Somalia, to discuss these issues. They're all going back to their respective countries to set up programs to educate a lot more people about free trade and about the Africa Continental Free Trade area. So there are a number of reasons why there is low awareness. And I think that one is because the Africa Continental Free Trade area and policies generally, it's a complex agreement, right? And it can be difficult for the layman or people who are not very conversant with policy, or who do not have like a degree in trade, to understand the implications to their businesses or the scope of what this actually is. I think it's also because it's also very relatively new. It has not fully been implemented, and therefore people find it difficult to really understand what it is. There's also a lack of resources available to help people understand what the Africa Continental Free Trade area is. There's some efforts by the government or by respective governments to make this much more understood. But I think that the responsibility should not be at the behest of the government alone. But those of you who are attending this program, those of us who are part of efforts to understand the Africa Continental Free Trade area, should do a better job of disseminating the ideas and ensuring that more people understand what the Africa Continental Free Trade area is. But I'll say that despite this low awareness, there's a growing interest amongst a lot of social enterprises, as well as Africans generally, on what the Africa Continental Free Trade area is. We got a lot of interest in this program that we're running in Dar es Salaam right now, because people are interested in sort of understanding it, despite the fact that there's little information out there. I think that aside from being social entrepreneurs and doing this for financial gain, I think we also need to be activists or advocates. In my country, Nigeria, the organized private sector was very, very wary of the Africa Continental Free Trade agreements when those conversations started. They set up a lot of lobby groups to actually pressure the Nigerian government not to sign that agreement, right? From people who you'd think understood the benefits of this of having this open market, or having like this single market across the continent of Africa. We found a lot of hesitation from them. And mostly it was because the organized private sector was wary of competition from other African countries, and therefore resisted the Africa Continental Free Trade area initially. Now we're seeing that they're accepting this a lot better now. And I think it's also because the Africa Continental Free Trade area will eliminate tariffs of most goods and services traded between African countries, which makes it easier for businesses from other countries to enter the Nigerian market. And that competition wasn't something that a lot of them were comfortable with. But that's changing. And I think it's important for us as people who now understand the benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade area, or to stand up and be advocates for these values and explain it to other people who do not necessarily understand it need to. A project on my organization called African Liberty currently works to engage with these individuals in the private sector who are hesitant about Africa Continental Free Trade area, or who are very averse to competition, right? And let them know that the benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade area. And I believe that working together with other entrepreneurs and policy makers will help us lead to a prosperous future for the continent of Africa. So there are two things that I really want us to take away from this conversation. One, I think we already understand the benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade area, and I doubt that anyone here has too much of a hesitation towards it, or has concerns about moving in that direction. But I think that as social enterprises, there are two things that we should be doing. One of which I already touched on, which is that we must be advocates ourselves for these ideas. We must shout about it. We must speak about it. We must continue to have conversations about it, because the more people understand it, the more people know it, the more we are likely to we're likely to as a whole benefit from it. And the more we are also likely to fast track the pace at which the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, or the execution of it, happens. I was speaking to a gentleman a couple of weeks ago who also happens to be a trade expert, and his opinion was that at the pace at which the implementation of the first phase of the Africa Continental Free Trade area is going, our generation, or this generation, is not likely to benefit from it, right? Because the pace is extremely slow. And therefore, I think that putting pressure on, and I think one reason is actually because in countries like Nigeria and many other countries, organized private sector or the labor unions are putting pressures on their governments to slow down the process of implementation. So if there is not an opposing or like an organized movement to ensure that these countries are implementing the first phase as fast as they can, then we are likely not going to benefit from the Africa Continental Free Trade area within our lifetimes. So it's important for us as social enterprises, as business people, as advocates, to stand up for the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and make sure that a lot more people understand it. I also think that in preparation for the benefits that comes from this single market, it's important for social enterprises to start collaborating across borders. The organization that I work for is mostly Pan-African. However, for us to execute this project that we're doing in Dar es Salaam, we had to partner with a local organization. We had to understand the market. We had to incorporate, we had to work with an incorporated entity here to make sure that we're executing this there. I think that collaborating across the continent of Africa and just building partnerships will ensure that your social enterprise has leverages across the continent of Africa. You are unlikely to open offices in, Kampala. If you're a Nigerian business, open offices in Kampala or in Dar es Salaam or in Nairobi, within the next 2 to 3 years. But I think partnering with local organizations can broaden your scope, can make sure that you are able to access markets that you before now may not be able to access. I also think that and for my organization, that has also helped with fundraising, because if you are able to access markets through organizations, you're also able to access fundraising, also able to access investments or funds, through those partnerships that you're creating. So I think it's very important not to just discuss the complexities of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area right now, but also prepare ourselves as social enterprises, first by being advocates for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and speaking about it, speaking on radio, writing about it, making it part of your business to expose other business people or other partners or other people that you work with to what it is. And then also you as a business trying to find out, researching other potential partners that you might have across the continent of Africa and try to build relationships with them. So I think that way you are likely to have your tentacles across the continent without without just waiting for the full implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I think if those two things are the points that you take away from this conversation, and you sort of implement in your social enterprise or in your business, you're likely to set your enterprise up for you to reap the benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade area as our governments continue to sort of implement. I hope that I'll get a number of questions from you about this, and we can continue this conversation. But thank you very much for the opportunity to have this brief conversation with people who are interested in this subject.